Hello. Let's see.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, everybody. All right, I got 10 o'clock. Is my mic not working? Hello, can you hear me?
You're good.
Oh, good. I got 10 o'clock. Let's call this to order. Do we have our quorum? I've got John, got Steve and Terry and Charles. Yes, okay. We'll call the meeting to order as soon as I get my agenda back up on the screen here. We start with a roll call attendance, please, Ms. McEwen.
Okay, we have Director Grace,
Here.
Director Jensen,
Here.
Director Quinn,
Here.
Vice President Roberts,
Here.
President Hahn.
I am also here. Entertain a motion to approve our agenda today.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Steve, second by Terry. Roll call vote, please.
Director Grace,
Aye.
Director Jensen,
Aye.
Director Quinn,
Aye.
Vice President Roberts,
Aye.
President Hahn.
Aye as well. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
liberty and justice for all.
Ready to public comments on non-agenda items. Back to Ms. McEwen.
Members of the public may address the board on matters not listed on this agenda. The board cannot take action on any item that is not on the agenda. The board or staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed, or may ask questions for clarification. These items may also be referred to staff or scheduled on a future agenda. There will be a separate opportunity for public comment for each item on the agenda. We have no hands from the public.
All right, and then nothing emailed, I suspect. Item number 6, information and discussion items. A, fiscal year 2021/22 budget study session. Probably turning it over to Mr. Malinan.
Mr. President, members of the board, this is my third budget with the district, and as well as Hamid's. Maybe Hamid's got his fourth, but as part of our process, we do this study session, kind of go over where we see the budget at this time, then have whatever conversation, discussion from the board, direction to us. We will review again at your June meeting, and then in the end of June, we have had a special meeting at which time the board has adopted the final budget in advance of the new fiscal year, as opposed to prior years, they were doing it after the new fiscal year commenced. So we will get into a PowerPoint, if that's all right with you. I will be driving this, so if you just bear with me a moment. Any questions yet? If not, here we go. So this is our agenda for today, the preparation overview and our goals, the review of the funds and their status, and then your discussion and direction. Part of our process we'll talk about here is with respect to projections on our revenues. We strive to be conservative. We look to balance our budgets in all funds. One of the things we changed here a few years ago was that we eliminated the identification and use of carryover balances, because that was effectively the fund balance being shown as available for, in some cases, significant capital, which if expended, would have essentially drained the reserves for that particular fund. So we don't do that any longer. Part of our process is to initially focus only on our operating costs and not incorporate the one-time expenses or capital. So we want to focus on being able to do our operations, and we'll talk about how we can fund capital. Our fund balance focus, we project that going forward, and we do have policies that guide what we are supposed to maintain as a fund balance, and fund balances and the policy for reserves are intended to establish and maintain some minimum amount of money per fund for emergent, unexpected type situations, so that they are able to finance whatever emergency might come up. So we can use the surplus of those funds relative to that policy for one-time costs and or capital. We'll show you that in a moment. When we do our capital review, we again separate it out. We're try to prioritize by various funds, and within the funds, that either comes from, on an annual basis, the excess revenues to expenses, or from excess fund balance to the policy percentage that has been established. Pardon me. One of the things we did a few years ago was to revisit, revamp, and publish our budget allocations. So those are the costs as people envision our operations, and we can easily identify that the roads fund or the water fund or the wastewater fund or the solid waste fund, those are paid for by rates, or in the roads case, a special assessment. And those operations are self-supporting, so all aspects of them should be paid for by the rates. Administration, finance, and etc., general services, those support all of those other functions. And so there is a allocation of the costs for administration and general services given to each of those other funds. So they don't have their own accountant, they don't have their own general manager or HR department or staffing. And so our administrative costs are shared amongst them as a means of them being self-supporting within the organization. So we revisited our methodology. We put that into our documents so that the public has an opportunity and an awareness of what we do and how we do it and why we do those numbers. we've tried to perhaps simplify and enhance what we've done at the same time. So beginning in fund balances are shown, where we have the money, where it's going, separate fund balance schedules, and inter-fund transfers. So one of the things that we changed in this, the transparency of our budget, is there had been literally direct charges for administration or overhead to other funds. And so you really couldn't discern where the costs were coming from. And I believe now anyone looking at it can do that. So that's an effort on our part to be more transparent. And that then cost allocation plan. We look to develop the budget in accordance with our policies. So these are out of the policies. Balance our expenses with our annual revenues. Use criteria appropriately to create a fair methodology for allocations. Avoid deficit spending. And then review and adjust our fees and charges, and make sure that we have the appropriate cost recovery for those things that are not a district-wide service, but are more specific to an individual or a company. Examples of that, the simple ones are making a photocopy. Well, if we're making a photocopy for an individual, they should pay that cost. It's not up to the rest of the district residents to pay that for them. So we calculate what it is, 25 cents, whatever it is, and they pay it. And therefore, certain aspects of those individual services are not subsidized by the general public. Continuing on, these are what have been identified as the contingency fund levels within the various funds. General fund is 50% of the expense budget. Roads is 40, water's 25, and then wastewater and solid waste are both at 20%. So assessing our status, looking at our operational and capital budgets, that helps us better ID the true costs. We go through in our process each of the various department or division budgets and go through the exercise of reviewing the prior years and making sure if in the course of that there were some one-time kinds of costs, we identify them, we don't continue them. And our goal here is to be as reflective of our actual expenses and not having any, kinds of cushion per se, because to the extent that they're there and we've, not spent funds because we thought we needed them in a particular department or a particular line item, that takes away from the ability to use that dollar somewhere else. So part of our review process is to ensure the accuracy for the subsequent year based on a review of what we have done in the prior year, current year, etc. This last note, several funds have structural deficiencies, i.e. the operating revenues are insufficient. For the most part, today, and we've, I think, used this phraseology for the last couple of years, today we're going to be mostly focusing on the solid waste fund having a structural deficiency. I've already kind of touched on how we go about the capital improvements and how we view them getting funded either in excess annual revenues to expenses or excess fund balance to reserve level. So here we go with the overall picture of our upcoming budget as we stand. District-wide, so this is all things considered. Salaries and benefits would go up about 4.1%. Again, we have incorporated a COLA, which historically has been based upon a Los Angeles CPI index. We also recognize PERS and medical cost increases, but overall 4.1%. We do recognize the legislation for increases in the minimum wage for those positions in the organization. Our services and supplies is down by 3.9%, which is a good thing, and I guess still a function of some of that review I was talking about. Debt service. So this is a new one. This is when we entered into those lease purchase agreements for the generators. So we have an annual debt service of 104,000. So obviously that's gone up. Capital outlay. It's gone down by 8.8%. We finished up the gate project. That was probably the gate drainage project. That was probably the biggest one that we had on our plans last year. And so overall, the total expenses come in at roughly 4 million, an increase of 38,000 or 0.3%. We'll get into the specifics of the funds. For the general fund, where we stand in our current 2021 budget year is we project an increase of approximately $237,000. That's good news. It means we are within our budget that in our fund balance, therefore grow by that amount, but for then the action of the board to follow up on prior board intent to move $689,000 to the Rhodes Fund for the debt service contribution. So overall, that creates a deficit, but as we will show you, the fund is still in good condition. For the upcoming budget, our revenue projections are pretty flat. We can't get a whole lot more conservative, but I do think we'll see some positive revenue increase based on the number of home sales that were experienced last year, and hopefully higher value reassessment of those properties, which should generate a little bit more than what we're projecting at this point. But our operating budget is balanced, and our ending balance in the fund would be 2.4 million prior to us looking at the capital and one-times. So here's the calculations that we use. Starting off here, we transfer this amount. So in effect, this is the number we're using to establish that contingency reserve. That comes in then at 1.3. We have 2.4 effectively. This is the remainder that is available for one-time expenses and or capital expenses. These are those proposed expenses: some body cameras for the police department, a radio for the new police vehicle, and a plotter. This would be in the Public Works Administration. The intent there is that we would have the capability of printing larger level plans than what is limited today to an 11x17 via our copier. So if you can imagine, we would be able to copy and print out a plat map as an example. So that's an identified need out in Public Works. Those are all kind of smaller items, not in somewhat disposable, if you will, for cameras. The net capital, the fuel station project has been on for some time. The intent there is we will change from an underground storage tank and the dispensing unit by Public Works. We'll go with what from a name of Convault, an above ground system, so as to avoid any potential groundwater or ground contamination from leaks. So we go above ground, we relocate it from its existing point. The total of that has been, still is budgeted for 200,000 for our share in the general fund at 64,700. The police patrol vehicle board had approved. However, the manufacturer was postponing taking orders until August, I think, of this year. So we didn't get it this current year. We're planning then to get it next year. A gate generator. In this case, what we're looking at is so that the gate can be totally self-supporting in the case of any PSPS or other outage, and independent even of the police building, which does have a generator, but then we have to go about extending the electrical line. So what's proposed is that we get effectively something along the lines of a I'll use Generac, which is a company name, but more dependable automatic type generator so that the gate function, it can be uninterrupted despite power interruptions. Stormwater pollution prevention plan. This is a new one, literally this week, where we've been working, I think, as the board knows, to develop the pollution prevention plan for the corporation yard and the transfer site, essentially all of our property here, to ensure that we're handling, disposing, conveying stormwater appropriately. And so we've completed the first couple of steps. The next one is, and we've budgeted here for about $40,000 shared amongst all the funds, because all of the equipment, maintenance, etc., is in and out of that area. So in this case, the general fund would have about $7,100 share. And then a skip loader, same situation, just shared amongst the various funds. So we have a total net capital of 163, and for all one-time net capital 178,000. So here's the kind of recap thereafter. Again, we're balanced in the operations. We have a beginning fund balance. And then once we're done with our one-time and capital expenditures, we end up with I would say, a healthy fund balance, and the general fund is sustainable. Specifically within the general fund, our salaries and benefits increase is 6.3. Services and supplies actually goes down. We have a capital increase and transfers out. So this is to reflect that money that is the last payment for the Bear Valley Road, Cumberland Road project. The total expenses is up 11.6. However, it's more like 3.6 because of the road transfer. Moving on to the roads fund. Currently, we expect in this year to have a fund balance increase of 54,000. You'll see that's really a function of having gotten the infusion for the debt service payments that the board had approved. Next year, our revenues, as always, are flat. However, we are seeing an operating surplus of $7,700 and a fund balance of 1.35 million before one-time costs and capital. Oops, wrong direction. Here we go with the calculation for the contingency reserve. Operating expenses, this case it's 40%. So the reserve requirement is 479,000. We are well in excess of that. We certainly do want to continue to monitor this closely because our operating budget is so close to the revenue, and we do envision working with the community on how to go forward with that road assessment, hopefully adjustment, because it's been 25 years since that was adjusted. So in terms of one-time costs and capital, we have over the last several years been working to improve or replace, I guess, guardrails. In this upcoming year, we're going to propose $75,000 for this. Similarly, striping of the roads has been a project wanting to get done. We've got an estimated, I think, 3-year plan at $48,000 per year. The pavement is really kind of a plug of sorts. I think, as the board knows, we're taking a look at the pavement condition study that was done about 8 years ago. I still have not heard from engineering consultants. I need to follow back up with my contact. But we put this in as a potential. A new study is 40 to 50,000. So we plugged this in to hopefully be able to have someone update the study that we did have done. Just recognize it's going to have some cost, but it's not the $40 to $50,000 that a new study would cost. The street sign replacements, this has been a 3-year project that Mr. Haggard has identified at $7,500 a year. Road material shed maintenance and roads building, a couple of items there of maintenance and or swamp cooler for the one times. And then and then the capital outlay, we'd already kind of hit the skip loader, their share of the stormwater pollution prevention plan, and then their share of the fuel station for the roads. So all told, 231,000. Now here's the biggie, I believe, for the roads fund. As you, I think, are aware, the existing equipment is worn. This past winter, we actually had one of our plows inoperable. And so I believe it's time for the district to invest in equipment that can be reliable and do the job that we're looking to get done with the snow plowing in our winters. What we have identified as the need is about 3 snow plows, approximately $80,000. For that amount, it is fully loaded, if you will, with on a Ford 350. No, I'm sorry. I think they're probably bigger than that. Anyway, I think 550s is probably the size we'll need, whatever. We'll get into that detail if we have to, but point is they would have the plow assemblies, they would have the spreader assemblies on the back so that they're ready to go. And if we can get this purchase moving by, I think I'd seen August, we could have them in time for when the snow flies and needs to be plowed. The financing that we've identified, similar to the generators, could have us kind of spreading those costs out, $52,000 a year for 5 years at 2.5% interest, I think Hamid had told me. So that we, hopefully we can move that. Now, that's not in these numbers, board. So somewhere we figure out how to pull that off, I believe. But we wanted to make sure it got on here and got on everyone's radar. So as we're moving forward, we have a better sense of what we're doing, why we're doing it relative to plows. Well, here's our surplus, or our recap. I'm sorry, I saw the word surplus. Operating surplus, $7,700 at the end of the budget. We have a 1.35, and after capital 1.12, which is in excess of what it's supposed to have as a fund balance of 479,000. More detail, salaries and benefits, up 4.7, services and supplies down 18%, capital outlay down 93%. That's the completion of the gate area drainage project. Transfers a little bit different. Overall, a decrease of $500,000 or 21% for the roads. The reserve fund, and one of the things I've talked to Hamid about that I believe we need to address is these reserve funds. So there'll be a transfer out. It has an ending balance. We'll pay this 21-22, and we'll have a remainder of $38,000. So, that's available for capital or for plow trucks or plow debt, etc. When we're done with the upcoming year. Okay, moving on to the water. Currently, we expect our fund balance to decrease by 400,000 to about 445. That's not necessarily a problem because the model anticipated utilizing fund balances in the first couple of years of the capital for the water fund projects. So our revenue is increasing due to the rates. We would have an operating surplus next year of almost $1 million, and we would have an end balance of 1.44 million before one-time and capital. How that looks relative to the contingency calculation is it should have an $830,000 reserve. It'll have in excess of that by about 600,000. But so the board's aware, one of the things that we do internally is just keep an eye on the model, because as we moved forward, we understood that the rate adjustments had to cover operating costs and had to cover the capital for that particular year. In the case of water, we had kind of the debt coverage ratio, and then the reserve fund, and the reserve fund level in these models that we've done doesn't get there day one. We've tried to limit or reduce the impact of the increases so as to have us in a positive position at the end of the 5-year period. So this is, I guess, not surprising if we're not there yet on the 25% once we're done doing these things. So we have continued to budget for this hydrogeological report, i.e. taking a look at where is the water, what is its availability, what is its quantity and sustainabilities. That I think the district has done over the years, but it's been some time since they've done it. And so again, in the vein of trying to improve and perfect our local valley water source, we want to take a shot at that. The net capital, these may look familiar. This 2 vehicle replacements probably does not. So one of the things we're looking at is how do we go about financing, funding, and beginning to replace pieces of equipment that need it. So as an example, we have equipment that is most probably past its useful life, but they're very expensive. In some cases, like those plow trucks, maybe we finance them. Otherwise, we should be developing a system of setting aside some monies. In this case, we're talking about some vehicle replacements for the water enterprise. Those trucks are out there, as you know, every day, all over the place. And so it's a significant tool that the district has to give to the employees to get the work done. These equipment pieces had not been in our modeling. So we really were focusing on rehabbing wells and boosters and panels and lake fills and so on. So we need to kind of get our arms around that on the collective 20-year CIP and begin to develop the plan for financing those things. So at the end of it, we have 1.03 million. Again, here's fuel station share for the water, fuel, the stormwater prevention plan share from water, etc. The recap for upcoming year is a surplus. We have a fund balance prior to the one times. We have 85,000 fund balance afterwards. We understand that doesn't meet it, but given the adjustments and the modeling that we had done, the water enterprise fund is sustainable. Here's the recap a little more specifically. Salaries and benefits 4.7. Service and supplies in this case is up about 4%. We have debt service, that is those generators. Capital outlay increase, and that varies as I think the board is aware. Our CIP needs to be revisited and revamped because of the PSPS demands for emergency power and having to shift priorities to make sure that got done while some of these other things have been on our list. So we've got to adjust that. Transfers out decrease. Anyway, increase of about 8.8%. Again, you'll see capital is a pretty good 1/3 of that amount. The reserve fund, and this is one of those situations again where in our modeling we utilized all resources. So there's the water enterprise fund, then a water reserve fund, and we identified those as somewhat synonymous. They're all the water funds. So I'm envisioning moving towards not having these reserve funds, but having just a single water, wastewater, solid waste fund or road fund through which everything's going. So we don't have questions of, well, we anticipated using this here, and people otherwise look at the fund balance and it seems low, but we have another checkbook over here somewhere. So, but nonetheless, in this case, it goes up ever so slightly. But we do anticipate that being a part of the financial assets for the system. Here's our wastewater. This one is now with increases going to have a $65,000 decrease, and it needs to bring in 158 from the wastewater reserve. Again, some of the financial assets for that system. Next year, we'll be getting more revenue with the increases. We anticipate a really nominal operating surplus, and we're going to be starting off with 0. So that's our fund balance. Our contingency reserve should be about a 161. So obviously we're going to be behind on that. But again, if we refer back to our modeling, that had been envisioned that, kind of the cash flow and the availability of some of the financial assets in the reserve or the fund balance will keep us in a positive, as well as, out of the red. But that over time, we will get back to that reserve fund amount. So the one-time in capital for the wastewater, for first thing is some safety equipment, got to replace some sand in the drying beds. There's a project to reestablish, because there had been some trees out there, reestablish some trees. And then the capital, this maintenance and storage shop has been a budgeted item for several years. Some may say many years or too many years, but that's been an identified need for some long time. But part of these new items, this one in particular comes from the CIP, as does the 80 that we had presented with the rate adjustment. This truck replacement is another example of that hadn't been a part of the rates, and all of the equipment replacement. Skip loader share, stormwater pollution share, fuel station share, all told 157 one-time in capital. The recap, once we're done, we don't meet our reserve fund balance, but we've understood that moving forward, we'll get there at the end of the 5-year rate adjustment. Specifically, salaries and benefits goes up only slightly, 1.3%, service and supplies 4.3%. Capital outlay is certainly significant because in this current year, we only have $13,000 identified because we didn't have the wherewithal to do any more. So because of that significant capital, this budget goes up by 17.6%. The vast majority of it is capital. Ending fund balance at the end of next year with the transfer in, we'll have a $43,000 fund balance. Solid waste, this is the one that probably, no surprise, needs the most attention. We'll be, having a $49,000 decrease in the fund balance, as well as utilizing $230,000 from its reserve. Obviously, we're doing our outreach and we'll be going through the rate adjustment process. But without that, our revenues are flat, and we have this level of deficit between our revenues and our expenses. Again, the revenues hadn't been adjusted since 2007, and it's pretty static. We should be looking at a $166,000 reserve. We're not there at all. So currently we can't really be budgeting, and we've not gone forward to assume the rate adjustment. And so we don't have some of the capital that you saw in the study, gates and paving and so on. We've identified these things that have been in our budget for some time or are new and emergent, like the pollution prevention plan. So operating deficit of 278. Ending balance is in the hole after we do everything we can. And here's the significant terms. It is unsustainable. We can't keep that up. And in advance of the question being asked, well, what do we do if? I think about the simplest way I can try to get to 278,000 would be certainly our staffing would have to change, our hours would have to change, and most likely the only component that we could change about disposal would be green waste and manure, i.e. not providing that service. And the collective of that, I think we can approach $275,000 or $278,000. But it's a combination of staffing and service levels to try to achieve that. The recap, salary decrease of 2.7, slight increase in service and supplies, capital outlays kind of negligible, so, to zero. Well, from zero. Transfers out, all told, we, I think, have done a good job to keep the cost down. It's a 0.4% increase over last year. So we have a operating deficit. We use everything that we've got, and it's not sustainable. So that's why we're going through the rate adjustment. Sorry. reserve fund actually will end up being drained with the last transfer. So in conclusion, we've done the review. This is an opportunity then for the board to have some Q&A with us and get some clarification and provide some direction to us. The next review will be at your June 10th meeting. We'll then bring it to the Finance Committee. And then on June 23rd, I think you had done this at your last meeting, we would look to have a final adoption of the budget. And with that, I will conclude and take any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mallon, and well done on that. I'll go to the board for questions. You want me to go in order? If you do, Director Grace, you're up.
Bill, just had a couple of quick questions. Remind me again, what is the life of the debt service on the generators? I think we had about 100 grand a year. How is that, a 5-year or what's the timing to exhaust that?
It is 5 years, yes.
Okay. And then just had a couple of questions, and it's for both the pavement study and the hydrogeological study. Understanding those are plug numbers, or I believe they're plug numbers. How confident do we feel that those are enough, I guess, or high enough? We'd certainly like them to be less, but in the case of the pavement study, for example, is it reasonable to expect it will be 15 grand or?
I really don't. When you're accurate about the plug number, what we tried to do is at least reflect something less than a full-blown study. So back in 2012 and 13, they spent 40,000. So you can anticipate, in my experience, we used to spend 50,000 on these too. But if in fact they can update it, which when I talked to a consultant about it, he indicated, yes, we should be able to update it. So that's how we plugged in 15. And I don't have any more confidence than hoping, I guess,
Okay,
that will be enough.
but you've done some diligence in terms of the discussions, and you feel like
Sure.
we will be able to reuse information.
Right.
Okay. And then similarly, the hydrogeological, I mean, 100 grand is a beefy number, obviously, but I just want us to be covered. I don't want us to have to come back and, if it turns out to be 150 grand, I know those, I've done a couple in my career. I know those can be pricey, so.
Right. It's really kind of a carryover from prior years, and I'm trying to reflect, and I know Will Parks isn't going to be available today. So I think we carried that over from prior years. We can double check about its, confidence level.
I'm just thinking it might be an idea to reach out to a couple of consultants and get, even if it's not a hard bid, it wouldn't be a hard bid, but just a rough order of magnitude estimate of what they thought that might take, given our geography and given, the quantity of areas that we're looking at, that sort of thing. That'd be my recommendation. I'd feel more comfortable if we had some backup for that number specifically, but also, and it sounds like you've done the diligence on the pavement study, but we may want to talk about that more. So, but those are my questions, Mr. President.
Okay, well done. Thank you, Director Grace. Director Jensen.
Yes, sir. So I didn't see anything on budgeting for the police or Parks and Rec. Is that going to be on a different day?
No, that was all incorporated into the general fund expenses.
Okay. I don't recall you going over them, but in any case, is there a way to see what the percentages of general fund use there are per department?
We can provide that.
Okay. And then as far as the special assessment for roads, by law, it's my understanding that special assessment can only be used for construction and maintenance of roads. How can we see an accounting of that to make sure that all of those assessments are going to the construction and maintenance of roads.
Hamid, if you got
I'd have to look to see what I know the roads assessment it's a governmental fund. It is restricted for roads, but I'd have to look more into, the specifics of what it's restricted for. So we can certainly research that.
Those are my only questions at this time.
Thank you, Director Jensen. Director Quinn.
I have no questions. Good report, Bill.
Thank you, Director Quinn. Vice President Roberts.
Go to report two. I know solid waste is an ongoing issue that we've got to deal with. And you touched on a few things, Bill, about, you had mentioned green waste and manure. You could be even eliminated. So, that requires a great deal of discussion going forward. We've had a lot of discussion about it, Bill, but, I understand the issues and very good report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Roberts. A question about the underground fuel tank and that system. Do we have to remove and remediate the underground tank, or can we abandon it in place? Do we know the answer to that?
I would ask Larry if he's got that, or Dawn, do you have the proposal particulars?
I have a quote for tank removal. We were told that they have to remove them.
Okay.
They can't put it in
I
place.
think that's correct, you guys. It has to be removed.
Yeah, and then remediate the soil if necessary around it. Okay, good. On the discuss, can everybody mute that's not talking? I've got a lot of feedback coming through my speakers. Does the gate, we talked about putting a generator at the gate, which I like the idea a lot. Just quick comments about where that generator might be positioned to make sure exhaust fumes don't enter the personnel booth. Maybe there needs to be a tall stack. If there's no sub panel at the gate, 15 grand might not cover that, but I'm just spitballing. I don't really need any answers there. Those were just comments. I can attest that our snow plowing equipment needs to be updated and replaced, because I did a ride along in the 2018-19 snowstorm year, and they're working on barely duct taped and tire wrapped equipment. So I support the purchase of 3 if they're F550s. Great. And then my last comment is going to be about police budgeting for the police department. Just applying basic, simple economics and capitalism to our lack of staffing, I guess, which I understand is prominent throughout the nation. People don't want to grow up and be police officer anymore. So if there's a scarcity in something with economics, it causes the price to go up. So I would support and would love to know how my colleagues feel about this, increasing the police salary and benefits budget so that we can attract talent and keep that vital organization staffed and going. I'll pause here and allow comments if my colleagues would like.
Mr. President, I think everybody knows how I feel on the matter. I would definitely support that, or at least evaluating it in the budget context for the upcoming year.
Thank you.
So I'll go. This is a complicated issue. It's not just about salaries and benefits for the department. It's about attracting young men and women that want to be cops. And when young men and women want to be cops, they want to be cops. I mean, they want the opportunity for advancement. They want the opportunities for special units, to ride motorcycles, to fly airplanes, to do things like that, for advancement, to be a detective, to do whatever. And, our community will never be able to offer that. So it's not just a money thing. It's about professional advancement. So attracting young men and women that want to be cops is always going to be difficult here.
I agree with both Charles and John. It is a complicated issue, and obviously we'd have to see the details and see how it penciled out. My top of the head view is that just money in and of itself is not going to be enough. There would need to be a good deal more personal fulfillment on the part of anybody who's taking a job like that. I think that's probably part of the reason why we've had fluctuations in staffing in the past, because I think it is not fulfilling in a lot of cases.
Yes. All three comments from the three board members are actually spot on. For me, I support our police department. I'm so happy that they're here. Subbing it out to somebody else would be actually the wrong move. And it's very difficult to get the police officers to come here for whatever reason, even though they're retiring in herds across the country. But the type of police officer that I see would be someone that is retiring and is looking for a place to augment his retirement, and because he's still young and he wants to continue in the the police role, and so we kind of have to specify or target those kinds of people, but it's just imperative for the success of this valley to continue with our police department, and it's going to require more funding. Once a year we pay or whatever the $340 or whatever it is for the police department, and it's not enough. So we have to subsidize through the general fund. I mean, everything goes up. We can't stop the increases, because that's how this country is, but we need to continue to support. And so, having said that, my vote for as long as it counts, it's going to become very short because I will be resigning. But I love the Valley, and I would love to see this police department continue on successfully, and it requires the support of the board. And I think the board has it too. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for those valuable comments. Perhaps just for this budgeting session, though, increasing the budget more than the cost of living adjustment and minimum wage increases, that 4.1%, maybe we can push a little bit more into that to allow for a possibility of hiring or recruiting. And I'll close with that. I'm going to send it. What do we got? Was that the end of your presentation, Mr. Mellon?
Yes, Mr. President.
Are there any members of the public wishing to speak?
Hello. Hello, thank you very much for that, Bill. So on the road, you said that the debt was paid off now for the road, and that's regarding the total loan. I think it was around $5 million or something. Is that the road debt is completely paid off?
At the end of next fiscal year, we will have made our final debt service payment. So by July 2022.
And it was 2 million on the loan.
I thought it was more than, and we held some in reserve. So that's where I'm kind of confused. I thought it was more than what the roads did cost, and some was held in reserve. So, but you're saying it wasn't, it was 2 million.
We got 2 million in financing. 1 million of that was set aside in the reserve. And so that reserve basically contributed towards the debt service over the 5 years. And then the other 1 million was used for the actual rehab of the streets.
Okay, thank you. And then let's see. I just have a couple more questions here. I'm just looking at my notes. Would you explain on the roads payment? I know, let me see. Well, no, not on that anymore. Sorry about that. The work we had done on the road, we had an engineering company do the valuation and define what was going to be done for road repairs on Bear Valley Road in Cumberland, correct? And then we had another company that actually did the work that was defined. And I understand from the previous things posted that we're in a process of a lawsuit with them, or with the monies we held back 7 or 10%. And so I'm not sure who we're in the lawsuit with or has one with us, and who exactly we owed, the engineering company or the people doing the road work. Would you mind explaining that? And then where does that lawsuit money show up that we're having to pay?
Maybe I can answer that. So we withheld the retainage on the construction. It is in the neighborhood of $250,000. I'm just a nice round number for everybody. That was from Griffith Construction. They were the contractor building the road. And so they did for that money. So yes, that claim exists. The second that we're engaged in is with Wildan Engineering, who designed the project. And for that we initiated litigation because of the faulty nature of the planning. And so we have both of those, and they're going to be essentially, I think, combined into one as it moves forward through the courts. But those are the two, and relative to the budget, we've not specifically said we're devoting so much to that. We have about $60,000 in the line item for legal within the roads budget. I can't accurately speculate the costs. So I think we just have to be prudent with our resources as we're moving forward with that litigation, and be cognizant of that moving target, if you will, for legal.
Well, thank you for explaining that. I appreciate that, Bill. And then the monies that was spent, I think you said maybe around 300,000. I forget how much exactly. I'm sure you recall, for revamping the transfer station. That money was taken from some fund. Are we repaying that? I didn't notice that in the solid waste that we were repaying those funds back to wherever we got them, or did we get them from our own fund?
Those funds were in the enterprise fund and the reserve fund for solid waste. So the funds were available at the time of the construction, so it's not being repaid back. The rate adjustment will eventually fill back the fund to the level it ought to be relative to the policy.
Great. So that was the monies you're saying came from the solid waste transfer station enterprise fund and no other funds. So we don't owe anything back.
Right.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. That's it.
Thank you, Jiva. Good questions. Is there anything else? I believe we have covered our agenda for this meeting. Anyone have anything to add? All right. Will we be adjourning to closed session through this link, or is there another link for our closed session?
It is through this link, President.
All right. This concludes our budget study session for today. Thank you all for attending. And if you're not supposed to be on the closed session coming up, I bid you farewell and a good afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.
Good afternoon. Brief recess.
Sure. Yeah. Does anybody need a 5-minute break, potty break or something?
Okay.
5 minutes. Reconvene at 11:08.
Very good.
We'll re-adjourn to open session with a summary of actions taken by Ms. McEwen.
Okay, the board has directed the general manager to appoint Jeff Kermode as interim chief upon the resignation of, or due to the resignation of our current chief of police, Tim Melanson, by a 4-to-1 vote. The employment agreement will be brought forward to the board on June 10th for ratification. And then the board, by a 5-0 vote, has directed the general manager to solicit proposals from recruiting firms to find a replacement for the chief.
Right. Thank you
At
very
least
much.
3 recruiting firms.
Say again.
For at least 3 recruiting firms?
Yeah, for at least 3, yeah, or more.
Correct. All right. Anybody have anything else?
No, sir.
As a Memorial Day weekend approaches, I have a 3-word saying, and it goes like this: remember on Memorial Day. I guess it's 4 words.
Absolutely.
I hope you all have a nice weekend, and I hereby adjourn this meeting without objection.
Thank you.
Thank
Everybody
you.
have a safe holiday.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.